parables. Parables are invitations to you and to me to again and again experience them, to experience the grace of God through them, to find in them how the Spirit speaks into your life and into my life. And so if we're going to enter into this parable, I'm going to invite you to do that with me by using just one word. And the word is this word, zizanium. None of you are familiar with zizanium? No. Okay, well, all right. Well, let me explain then. So zizanium is the Greek word that is used for weeds. As we go through that parable, the weeds this and the weeds that, it's this word, zizanium. And zizanium is a very specific word. You see, when I don't know about you, but when I hear the word weeds, and I'm thinking about a garden and growing wheat, I picture a bunch of little, like you got big stalks of wheat, and then you got a bunch of little weeds all bunched around the ground, right? That's what I picture when I read that gospel and hear the word weeds. But zizanium is not just weeds in a generic sense. Zizanium what we want to get out of this land. But it's deceptive because when you go to actually pluck it, it doesn't have the fruit, the produce, the bud. It doesn't have that thing that gives us nutrient and feed us. And so the master and the slaves are confronted with this field that is full of plants, but it is hard to tell what is good from what is useless. Now that describes, I think, the world that you and I live in. That as you and I go about in the world, out there, outside of these walls, it can be incredibly difficult to discern and tell what is good and life-giving and what is just useless. Maybe it's easier for you. If it is, be patient with me for a moment. But, you go out there in the world, and is it a good thing to acquire wealth and power, prestige, importance? Or is it something that's not all that useful? I think if you're honest with me, it's hard to tell, right? It's not just a simple closed book. Oh yeah, you never want the power, you never want to acquire wealth, all that, just reject it. That's not as easy as all that, is it? Right? And yet it can be so tempting to chase after such things as wealth and power and prestige and all that good stuff. And then find out at the end, it didn't give you all that much. You and I live in a world where it is indeed very difficult sometimes to discern what is useful and life-giving and what is just not good for much. And it's not just the world we live in, but sometimes it's our own inner lives. How do I talk about this with you? Sometimes we can be quite convinced that the thing, my personal pet project, whatever your personal pet project is, whether it's here at Trinity, whether it's out there in the world, whether it's in your families, whether it's with your friends, sometimes that personal pet project feels so good, and it feels so important, and so righteous, and so just aligned with the will of God. And then sometimes I can feel all those same things and go after it and find that it wasn't very useful in the end. It didn't have the fruit I was going for. Some of you brave souls out there are nodding at me. Do you know what I'm speaking about? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yes. When confronted with such a world as this, when confronted with an inner world such as this, let me go back to I, that's safer. I sometimes get impatient. I am like those servants who want to say, oh, dear God, it's a mess. It's a mess. Here's the one next thought. It's ruined. It's a mess and it's ruined. Let's give up on it, Lord. That's that whole servant thing. Let's go collect the weeds now. In other words, it's going to rip up all the other plants. This field is useless. Let's ditch it, focus on some other fields. And the master says, no. No. And that's where this gospel might confound us. The Gospels, or this parable, where this parable might confound us, the parables, this engagement that leads us into experiencing the divine grace, the divine love. That here in this parable we encounter a God who, when seeing that the field has been ruined, that what is good for you and what is not just all that useful is all mixed up together. Not just out there in the world, but in your lives. That at one moment you might be doing something that produces much good fruit. At the next moment you're doing something that just won't lead to much, right? And in the sight of all that, God's love for you is patient and steadfast. God does not rush off to that extreme pole of, it's a waste, just dump it, just get rid of it all. But that God, in God's most magnificent love, is patient, waits, knows that things will be transformed, that in the end, you will see what produces good fruit, that you are being led to something, indeed, that this good fruit that's out there, that's in you, cannot ever be completely destroyed by the weeds. That even though those weeds, as much as they're stealing the nutrient and the sunlight and the water from the good plants, both out there in the world and in your heart, they will never, never destroy the good crop. God, in God's patient, steadfast love, knows that about you, is patient with you, is patient with me, very patient with me, is patient with you and is patient with me as that unfolds. But indeed, this patience, my friends, this patience is not a pushover. It's not a doormat. It's not patience that just waits forever. That's that whole ending of the parable we shirk away from. But that ending of that parable is the reminder that in the end, all that is good shall be gathered together, and all that is just leads to nothing shall be nothing. And that indeed in you and in our world and in God's kingdom, that good fruit in you and around you shall shine like the sun.